Okay.
Why? Okay. So I asked Purnima to share her profile, and this is what she sent me. That she's a wife, she's a mother, and her hobbies. And her husband heads a real estate company. She's mother of three children who between them play about nine instruments. And she loves reading uh, and also reading the tarot cards. Her other hobbies are singing, sketching, and painting. And when I read this, I asked Purnima, "Is this all?" And she said, "Yeah, that's all." And I was like, "Yeah, you are modesty personified." So first off, raising three kids, and then facilitating that they learn about nine instruments is one hell of a job. And the second thought that came to my mind was that I don't have anybody in my friend circle or family who reads tarot cards. Perhaps Purnima is the first person whom I know who reads tarot cards, and maybe at some point I should get my future told by her. So, um, so I actually searched, Googled, and went to her company's website. And this is the official profile. Mrs. Purnima Subramanian is the chief finance officer of Reliance Nippon Life Insurance, one of the largest life insurance companies in India. It's a joint venture between Reliance Capital and Nippon Life Japan. She's a member of the executive council at Reliance Nippon Life. Purnima has 20 years of experience in various areas within finance, including P&L management, statutory accounting, budgeting, and planning. She has worked with various organizations such as Tata AIG, ICICI PRU, and Morgan Stanley. Prior to joining Reliance Nippon, she was associated with Tata AIG General Insurance as CFO. Purnima is an alumnus of ICAI and ICWI. So I could not resist talking about this because it's truly impressive, just like the profiles of the other two speakers. And I believe that this gives the complete picture of Purnima's personality. This is fine. This personal profile is fine, but without I took the liberty of adding the official uh, uh, resume also on the profile. So good to have you as the speaker, Purnima. And it's over to you. Take it away from here. Would you like to uh, screen share your PPT, and how do you want to go about it?
Yeah, yeah. So, if
I will stop my share, and you can take it from there.
yeah, yeah.
Right. I have stopped my screen share, so you can click on present now, and
Yeah, just one. Are you able to see right now my screen?
yes, it's
Yes.
just loaded. Yeah. Oh, it went away again.
It's not sharing, is it?
It started displaying, and then it went away.
Yeah, it seems to know.
There you go. Yep, it comes.
Now showing, right?
Yes.
Okay. So can I start, sir?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, Eat, Pray, Love. When Mehboob sir asked me, you can choose a book that you want. The first book that came to my mind was Eat, Pray, Love. And maybe after I finish, I will show you how my Eat, Pray, Love books looks. You know, I bought it quite a few years back, and every time when I, felt a little dejected, or I thought that, oh God, what is happening? I've always read, a bit of this book once again. So, like that, I think during the last couple of years, I've gone back to this book many times. And I think the presentation itself that I will make may not, fully justify, some of the portions of the book, which are really very nice from a reflection perspective. So it's a book that I hold very close to my heart. And so when he said, would you like to do a book? I think this was the first book I sort of, thought of. So, and this has been written by Elizabeth Gilbert. And like you see, it says eat, pray, love. So these are the three aspects of life that Elizabeth, and it's supposed to be a story of her own life that she sort of goes through, and finally she finds balance in life. So that is really, what the book is about. Um, so from a summary perspective, I want to just give you a little bit of snippets of how the story went, and then I'll probably explain what Eat Pray Love means in this book. So Elizabeth Gilbert is an author, and she has a successful career. She has everything. She has a husband, a good house, and her husband's wanting to have children, and that's where she is when the story sort of starts. But instead of feeling happy and looking forward to a future with her husband, she's sort of consumed with a panic, with grief, with confusion. And at a point, she sort of breaks down, and she decides that this is not what I'm looking for in life, and I have to find a meaning to my life. And then, the divorce happens. And then, she goes into a sort of depression, and she falls in love with somebody called David. And that's the point at which she says that this is not how I want life to be. And then she sort of, in order to find out what really she wants in life and what will make her truly happy, she takes on this year-long journey around the world. And this book is really about that journey that she's taken. She goes to Rome, she goes to India, and she goes to Bali, and then she sort of comes back. And by the time she's back, she sort of feels that she's found that purpose in life, and she's found the balance that she was looking for, and she feels truly happy. So that, why did she choose these three places? She chooses Rome because one, she loves the language, the way it is spoken, and she thinks it's a very beautiful language. And then to study the whole art of pleasure. And why was this eating such an important thing for her? Because she was a New Yorker. And like a typical New Yorker, all she wanted to do was, oh, I have eaten, extra butter today, or I've eaten a very heavy meal. And so I must have consumed additional calories. And sorry, and I need to, reduce. So always she's been conscious of what she's eating and making sure that, she doesn't put on weight. In comparison to that, she wanted to go to Rome and, simply feel the pleasure of eating. And in the book, she basically says by the time she's finished the 3-4 months in Rome, she's put on 23 pounds. But she says these are the 23 happy pounds that I've put on in my life. So it was for that pleasure of the language, the love for the food that she wanted to feel, that she sort of went to Rome, and she ate. Then she went to India, and in India was where she started to understand the value of devotion, the value of praying, and what and how to meditate, because she was at a point where she was always in chaos and she wasn't able to focus her mind on meditation and prayer in the beginning. True, by the time she sort of leaves India, she sort of becomes a lot more composed, and she begins to sort of understand how to hold on and how to have the calm and the composure. um, and then she goes to Bali, which is where she studies the whole art of the balance between how to enjoy in this world and how to also have spirituality. So it is not that you should either have only the worldly life or you have only the spiritual life, and you have to find a balance in order to be truly happy. And that is the balance that she was sort of looking for, and she found that in Bali. And she goes and sees an elderly medicine man, um, Kayut, and he sort of gives her a lot of teaching, you can say, or perspective in life, you can say. And finally, now that she seems to have found balance, she's fallen in love. And then she finally comes back to New York, and she's feels more sorted, and she feels a lot happy. So that really is the story. If you have any questions, I can take them as I go along, or I can continue.
Yeah, please continue. I mean,
Um, okay. Before I could sort of go to the what I like, I think what is important probably in the first page, the on the side I have put these three little um, things called eat, pray, and love, and eat in that. And one of the things that also happens to her when she is in Rome is she goes to one of these old monuments, which was King Augustus. It was not his palace, but it was a place where he kept all his artifacts, and he kept all his things which were precious to him. And she goes to see it, and it is obviously completely in the ruins. And right now, it is only used for people who don't have a public toilet. They basically use that old sort of building. So she thinks that at one point of time when Augustus was using it, it was like it was the firstly Rome was the center of the world, and it was a power. To where it sort of it completely went into ruin, but still, the building was sort of holding up despite the ruin. So in the ruin is the road for transformation. And if the building could have survived, and if it was finding its a new meaning for itself, so can I mean, that's how she sort of relates to that trip that she takes to see this place. Similarly, when she is in India, um, she is trying really hard to sort of be able to meditate, to sort of find her calm, etc. And she meets somebody called Richard, who's also come there to India, to the ashram, to learn meditation. And he also has his own issues in life, and he has a divorce, and then he uh, comes to this ashram. So he tells her that you're trying so hard that you're not able to actually find the calm. So you need to stop trying, and you need to surrender, and you just need to let it be, and then you will find the peace that you're looking for. Um, and lastly, when she is in Bali and she sort of finds a balance and she falls in love, one of the things that Philippe, the person that she's fallen in love with, tells her is that balance is not letting anybody love you less than you love yourself. So I think that was one of the things that really sort of resonated with me, and I sort of really thought, yes, I mean, that's something to think about, and something to sort of keep with myself. So, so coming back to what I like, um, what I really like is that the story tells you that you need to claim responsibility for your happiness, your contentment. And if you keep sticking to what the society thinks and what people like and what is the right way to be, you're not taking control of your life and you're not taking control or claiming responsibility for your own happiness. So it is not going to come and fall in your lap. You need to take responsibility for it. And this whole thing about the validation of the idea of a personal or a spiritual quest, that you need to go through that journey in order to find your space and your peace and your balance. And so I love that her quest to heal, to find the peace and to restore balance in her life, she takes it into her hands, she travels, she does a whole lot of self discovery, and then comes up with some truths that really resonate with her. And that is the bit that sort of resonated with me as well. There are a couple of quotes that I've picked up from the book that I just, want you to go through um, without really reading out all of that. The one that I would like to sort of read is in India, when she is in the ashram, this person, Richard, says, "You need to learn to select your thoughts just the way you select your clothes every day. This is the power you can cultivate. And if you want to control things so bad in your life, you need to work on your mind. That's the only thing you should be trying to control." I think that was a very powerful thing that he said, and it sort of is like a point where she sort of takes that learning or that teaching that Richard sort of gives her, and she changes quite a bit after that. And after that, Richard sort of leaves, and she's there for a couple of months. But after that, she's beginning to start of it start she gets into the groove of the meditation, of the ways of the ashram and of finding peace, etc. So I think that was the one thing that I really liked. From a lessons perspective, I think, Mehboob sir, am I okay on time, or have I exceeded my time already?
No, 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 no. We have plenty of time. Continue, please. Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to read out some portions, in the book, and therefore, the interpretations or the learnings that I have, from the book. So in one of the places, Liz says, "I just spent some time in Rome and I came here feeling so great. And now here I am at the source and I feel more disconnected than ever." And this is what Liz says when she just comes into the ashram, because she thought there will be a guru. She comes into the ashram, and the first question she asks is, "Where is the guru?" And so the person, the disciple, explains she's in New York. So she says, "But I've come from New York to India to see her." So, immediately she sort of feels a disconnect, and she says, "I have come here so that somebody is going to sort of work on me in a way that it'll cleanse me." But that was not what was happening. She was happy. She wanted this somebody to work on her, and now she's going to find happiness. But none of that happened when she came to India. She was supposed to clean and, mop the ashram. She was supposed to be silent for a very long time. She was supposed to learn meditation on her own. So that is when she says this, that "I just spent so much time in Rome feeling great. And now here I am at the source and I feel, more disconnected than ever." And then Richard, from Texas, he says, "You want to get to the castle, you've got to swim the moat." So basically, he's saying that in order for you to get to where you want to be or you want to progress forward, you are the one who has to make that sincere effort. Nobody else is going to make that for you. So that was one. Then at the top end of the slide, there is this bit. There is a wonderful old Italian joke about a poor man who goes to church every day. He prays before the statue of a great saint and begging, "Dear saint, please, 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 let me win the lottery." Finally, the exasperated statue comes to life, looks down at the begging man, and says, "My son, please, 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 you need to buy a ticket." So he has to buy a lottery ticket in order for him to win the lottery. So he goes every day and he's praying. So the thing is that the change can manifest, or something can be worked on you once you actively sort of participate in the process. You have to be there in it, and you have to be the one who is sort of driving it. Then the change will happen and it will manifest in you. That's the lesson I sort of took away from it. And then there is this bit which says, "We all want things to stay the same, David. Settle for living in misery because we are afraid of change, of things crumbling to the ruins." Then I looked around in this place at the chaos it's endured, the way it's been adapted, burned, and pillaged, then found a way to build itself up again. And I was reassured that ruin is a gift and ruin is the road to transformation. This is the bit that I said in the first, on the first slide. Basically, when she goes to see this place, which was once upon a time the sort of the treasure house, or the place where Emperor Augustus kept all his precious things. Um, it was one of those things. Then for the later people who came in, it was used as a place where all the explosives were stored, and so on and so forth. And then it became so unimportant that people who didn't have a public lavatory would then start to use this. So it's come from a very important place that it used to be to it fell into the ruins, but still it it hadn't collapsed. It was sort of finding its way. So her my interpretation and learning, and hers as well, in the story is that there could be a comfort found in familiar territory and in pain, etc. But yet, even if it all falls apart, ruin could bring about the beautiful growth opportunities. I mean, even if you're there in that sort of a ruin, it is a road to transformation if only you believe so. And you need to pull yourself out of it. So, from a lessons learned perspective, I think this is what sort of worked for me. The last really the slide I have is, if I had to, all this is what I thought was great about the book. But if I were to be the critique, and if I were to sort of think, what is it that, if I would want to reflect on it, taking a distance from it, I would think that, the bit where she says, um, this whole journey of hers somehow where she sort of starts off saying that it is your responsibility to make yourself happy, etc. In the end, her happiness sort of is seeming to be because she is now in love with this Philippe. So being happy without being with a man is also a way to live, and it does not sort of trivialize love. So why is it that the author chose this sort of line of writing? Her line of writing somehow finally, and I don't know how much the men in this forum will agree agree to it, but it sort of seemed that finally, when she is in love with a man, is when she seems to have found balance, which I'm not fully okay with. While many lessons she's learned seem correct, and I also feel that I cannot imagine if men felt so incomplete without women, and if there was ever a book that was written like this. So when did this become acceptable for men to be, sort of our projects, or to be the thing that would have made us feel happy? When did it become acceptable for women to be defined by their men, as if something less than this arrangement sort of denigrates the sanctity of a relationship? So, I mean, that was something that, I felt after I sort of absorbed the rest of the stuff on the book. I was thinking, why should it have ended in a way that she just had to fall in love to find happiness? The other bit that I also found strange was that Liz goes on a voyage of self discovery. She suffers the pain and the depression and finds love. But is it really important for us to, have to actually go through the ruin? Do you have to get to that, that low point for you to have an essential road towards transformation? Why is it required? I mean, you can learn it, you can learn lessons in various ways. You don't have to go into that ruin in order to find transformation. So there's no specific insight the author provides in that sense for us from a takeaway perspective. This is one way to sort of look at it. But the book doesn't really sort of tell you what you need to do in life. This is her way to sort of do it. She's gone to the ruins and she's sort of transformed herself and she's found balance, she's found love, etc. It is just one of the many ways that you could have sort of lived life. It is not a lesson in that sense for anyone else to follow. There could be various ways. So, in that sense, the insight on how to live life is not what the uh, book really prescribes. So that is really what I had.
Um, Thank you, Purnima, for a good presentation. First off, your PPT looks very artistic and eye-catching. I haven't seen many book presentations, even corporate presentations that are like so attractive and it catches the
All
attention.
my corporate presentations are also like this only.
Okay.
I hope my boss is thinking like this about me. He's never told me that.
So the first thought I had when I saw the PPT and even now was I should get this template from Purnima and start using it for my personal or Hydra, presentations. It's so good.
No,
Um,
sure. In case you need
right,
anything else from a presentation perspective, you tell me. It's my
right,
favorite hobby.
right. So thank you very much, and also tarot cards. Okay, sometime in the future.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
uh, and uh, very nice presentation. I do have some thoughts, but I would like the other people here to say something, their thoughts or feedback, or if they have any queries. Uh, who wants to go first? Surya ma'am, your feedback first, please. The same most member of the club. Surya ma'am. Surya ma'am. ఎక్కడున్నారు? All right.
Yeah. Now,
Uh,
I I didn't like the conclusion of the book that he fell in love with somebody as if women cannot live all alone by themselves. I want
I
to
also agree to that
I
one.
am a I am a living example. I am a cancer survivor. I stay all alone. I lost my husband with cancer. I am managing myself. I am not thought of getting in love with somebody. I thought I can manage myself. I like to eat, pray is okay. Transformation is essential, and that kind of transformation you can get in ashram and all because the circumstances are like that and that influences us. Till that it is okay, but marrying I didn't like. I think women can live on their own also. That's my opinion. I still strongly believe that.
No, Suryapini, so I agree to that bit. In fact, that's why if I had to critique the book, that was what I said, that why is it so essential that, only if you have managed to find a guy who you can be in love with, only then you've succeeded in life. I mean, that's not important. That's an essential, aspect if you do fall in love, but that is not the essential thing to be happy. That I also, that's what I also said. I don't agree to the author per se on that.
Okay. And eat, pray, and what is it? Eat, pray, and
Love.
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 Sorry. Eat, pray, and love. All these three words are something different which are connected in this story. Eat, pray, love. All three are different. First, I didn't read this book. I didn't know anything about it. So from morning when she told me she's going to present eat, pray, love, I've been thinking, how is this three things will be connected? Now, now it is very clear for me.
Yeah, so I have read this book so many times. It's all torn now.
Okay.
I've read it so many
This
times.
is what I have to say, Mahbub sir.
Thank you, Surya
Thank
ma'am.
you for giving me opportunity.
Thank you, Surya ma'am. Always a pleasure to listen to you. Purnima looks like she's not just read the book; she has eaten it. So,
She has eaten it, digested it also.
right. Nina, you want to go say something about the
No,
talk in
I
the
was
book?
just curious, like, the part where she comes for, the prayer and meditation to India. Which part of India did she come to? Like,
See, she doesn't actually say it in so many words. Even in the movie, also it is not very clear. But the movie, in the book, it's definitely not very clear. In the movie, I know that because you have this taxi and driving like a maniac, the taxi driver, it has to be Calcutta. But
okay. So,
yeah.
because I was wondering, like, why did she have to go to Italy to eat? I mean, India is also a flavor of delicacies over here. You can go to one particular state, wherever you have that cuisine, whichever you like to Punjab probably to eat, and then to somewhere else. And she doesn't have to go to Italy. So that's what I was like, how can India? I mean, yes, India stands for a lot of religions. It's just my perspective. Just curious, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a
Nina,
very
I have one, Purnima, I have one word to say. Nina, see, people are mad in different ways. People are mad in different ways. So she is mad in going. We make dosa at home, but my children like eating the same dosa in the hotel, not at home. So, like that, people are different. People are mad in different ways. So that was her madness to go to Italy, Rome, and eat.
No, no. Also, I think the thing is, how do people in the US sort of perceive you? I think Italy, they perceive as the place which has got this pleasure and they relate it with pleasure. They relate India with prayer and, I think things like that. Some of the other things that they said in the book, which are not right at all. They go to a place to drink thumbs up. He says, I think I will take you to drink thumbs up. And then she picks up the bottle to drink. And he says, in India, you cannot touch anything but yourself. So he gives her a straw. So it's a very wrong perception. But these are all perceptions in the, some of those things are not very great. So I didn't even want to sort of bring it up. But I think it is from the perception. Like even in the North India, if you stay in North India, they will talk of all South Indians as South Indian. अच्छा साउथ इंडिया में तो ऐसे come on, you've not studied geography or what? Why would you not know there are 4 states in, and they all speak different languages? But for everyone, आप Tamil हो क्या? So I'm not. But अच्छा कौन सा state है? Why don't you know? You know, no, there are 4 states. But that is the, that's the perception. वो साउथ में ना सब कॉफी पीते हैं और तमिल बात करते हैं. That's the,
Very true. I mean, foreign authors,
Purnima,
yeah, I
Purnima,
totally agree.
Madrasi.
Purnima,
Madrasi.
Purnima, small correction. We are now 5 states.
Now, yes. Now we are 5 states.
So,
I mean, usually the foreign authors don't give a justice when they describe about what is in India, what are the, the culture, the beauty, what is there. And it's all vividness, that is there. We don't do a justice to it. It's only like a foreigner who comes to a hotel and, everything's so dirty and that's what. I mean, they don't see the other phase of it.
Yeah, they don't.
If they do, they would find all of it in India. You don't have to. I mean, I'm being born, brought abroad. Everybody talks to me about going somewhere not settling in India. But I said that I haven't explored my country yet. There's so much to explore, and why should I just? I can. It's like a subcontinent, right? You get everything here. You want
Yeah.
to travel, you go to Ladakh. So it's everything here. That's why.
Yeah.
But then that's a different perspective. I'll just share. Thank you.
But
Great quotes.
one point about that ending where she marries the guy in Bali is what she actually did in her real life with her second husband. She met her after the first divorce. She met the second husband in Bali, married him. Of course, that marriage also broke. So I'm guessing, which I have to check after this session, that when she wrote the book, she was only putting her experience in the book in that character, because that's what authors try to bring into their characters. Maybe when after a first breakup, she found the real meaning in this guy, and then perhaps at that point thought this was the meaning in life, to find the perfect partner as a husband. So just imparted that onto the character in the book. And to tell people here that though the character in the books finds meaning after getting married to this guy, in real life uh, she actually broke up her second marriage, divorced second marriage, or maybe died, and she found a partnership, a relationship with a girlfriend, which also broke up because she died. And then the fourth partner is a male again. That's also broken. So I do think that the conclusion of her marrying and closing the was for the closure of the book, not to say that this is the only way a woman can find meaning in life and live the life. But if you remove that part, the first 2/3 based on what Purnima mentioned makes a lot of sense. I particularly find that the important thing in life is to filter your thoughts, because thoughts come like waves and waves, but what matters is if you can distill and filter out and stick to what actually matters, then thought leads to action, and action leads to meaning in life. So that was one quote that what Purnima showed, that I also really agree. And it sounds deceptively simple, that you control your thoughts, you can control your life and find meaning, but it's on a day-to-day basis, it is astonishingly and very painfully difficult. Sometimes you wake up and have a welter of thoughts, and then my classmate come industrialist friend who's very spiritual, he keeps on telling, Mehboob, the main thing in life is to filter your thoughts and only allow those thoughts to occupy your mind space that actually matter. But if I actually have to document from morning to night how my mind wanders, it goes from fiction writing to novels to Java to my family, my son, I see something for my daughter. I mean, there are a million thoughts going on, and all the CPU power or whatever I got from my birth and God is actually used for so many things. And the thoughts that should actually be there and are relevant to those days activities, I have to force myself. And actually sometimes they start only when I start the work. Instead of thought leading to work action, I have to force myself to act upon what I have to do today, so that that thought clings to my mind. Until then, it keeps on wandering. So it is not a very deeply or profoundly philosophical book, but actually when you think about it, these are simple principles of philosophies that are actually complicated to actually implement. It's very easy to say that you have to make the effort to find your happiness. How many times I mean, simple sentence, of course I have to, who else will? But then on a day-to-day basis, how many times we consult our spouses, kids, friends, gurus, mentors, and finally it's the same thing that you already knew, and you have to get confirmation or moral support as if you are still a teenager. I mean, it's as sometimes if you want me to get very amusing, if I want to apply to a certain company to a job, I have to do it myself. Then I find myself checking with Swapnil or my wife, hey, do you have to really apply to this company? And then I'm like, yeah, my success would be my effort, but you still have to lean on some pillars in your life. So, what I understood so far, I have seen portions of the movie and heard Purnima's. Why this popularity of the book is that it perhaps simplifies philosophy. I mean, that's what I can understand about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Maybe just 1 minute I will take, and just one more thing that in the
Sure.
book that I thought was very, it doesn't, form any important this thing in the thread of the book and the story. But in one place, she's really dejected because she wants the divorce so that she can sort of move on, and the husband refuses to give the divorce. Says, I'll give you everything I have, but I just need you to give me the divorce. And he doesn't. So she is traveling to some place, and I can't remember which, some one place to another, and with a friend of hers. And her friend says, what I want you to do, Liz, is just close your eyes and write a petition to God and leave it out to the universe, saying that, what do you want? So she says, I want to divorce from my husband. And then she says, okay, who else will support it? Think of everybody who will really support this petition of yours to the universe. Then she says friends, her immediate friends, her family. Then slowly the circle increases, and she even talks of Bill Clinton and even Abraham Lincoln, who's passed away. So many people, she keeps on saying all these people's energies are behind this petition. And then she closes her eyes and she goes off to sleep, and half an hour later her phone rings, and she and her lawyer calls her and says that her husband's agreed to give the divorce, and he's everything that she's asked for, he's agreed to all the terms, and that's over. So that's one bit of a small nugget, which sort of tells us that this whole power of seeking something from the universe, you seek and you trust and it will come to you. So, and I have also seen personally in my life that it does happen many times. But it was very amazing to see how she sort of used it in the context of the story. So I think that
Is it
was,
taking off from The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, that you ask the universe and universe will give it to you? That's the.
yeah, maybe it is that what even Paulo Coelho says, that in one of his books, that you ask the universe and you really ask it with conviction, and then you will get it. So yeah, so to that point, I think that was another very interesting thing that I thought I should just mention.
Great. Okay. So, what about other people? Lavanya, Hari sir, Ravi Teja, um, uh, Murli sir. Any comments, feedbacks, questions?
It was a nice presentation, very nicely done, and I think all the discussion covered most of the points. I saw the movie, I didn't read the book, and frankly speaking, I didn't like the movie. I
Yeah,
mean, so much, there was so much hype. Oh, this is a beautiful book and all that. But after I saw the movie, I was disappointed, and I said, I'll never read this book. So that's why I haven't read
the
the
book is
book.
better than the movie, I think.
Yeah, could be. I don't know. I mean, the same thing. See, if the whole story is about seeking love, I could understand in the end she falls in love, and you already covered it, so there's no point in telling it again. It's not
Yeah,
about why women can live alone or not alone. I feel that the story as such fails there. Like you build up so much hype around self-discovery, finding devotion, finding balance in life, and in the end, it is just a cliched end where you
yeah,
go
yeah.
in love
I
with
agree.
someone
Yeah.
and it's a happy ending. That's where I think, as a story, it totally fails. Though there are some excellent quotes and the writing is beautiful, it doesn't make a good read to me. So, anyways, thank you so much for the presentation. I enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lavanya. Shall we move on, or Ravi Teja, Hari sir, anything you want to add?
No, it was a good presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And first time I hear about the book. I haven't read the book, nor the movie.
Okay.
I would have been happy little more if you could have told me something about the language, the literary part of the book. How was the flow of the book? And one more thing I would like to know uh, how the book is written. Actually, of course, it is a non-fiction, but how is it? I mean, is it written? The tone is the tone of a lifestyle book, or mm whether it was, I mean, so what type of book it is, in fact? Is it a biographical or something? And of course, the language also, little bit I would like to know. Thank you, Purnima.
Yeah, yeah. So while she doesn't sort of claim that this is a story on her own life and it's like an autobiographical story, that's not what she sort of claims. But it has a linkage to her life, and she did do the travel. She did find her husband in this manner, um, and she was divorced before that. So there are a lot of similarities with her life. So in that sense, you could say that it is about her life, but she doesn't specifically allude to it anywhere that it is an autobiographical book. It doesn't, at least to my mind, I don't think she says that anywhere, but it does have a similarity, like what Mehboob sir mentioned earlier and others. And from a flow of the book, etc. perspective, I think the language is not so. If you want to really go for the language, then you might choose maybe a Salman Rushdie or somebody like that who's so good with words that even the story sort of escapes you, and the way it is written sort of captures your mind and attention. It is not like that. It's a very normal. It's not a piece of literature, if that is what you're asking. It's not a piece of literature.
Cool.
Mehboob sir,
Murli, go ahead.
Mehboob sir,
Murli sir, please go ahead. Please say.
it's very heartening to see that youth are picking up very serious books, and it's not that always they go for thriller or pulp or anything like that. And the way she explained it, her in-depth reading, of course, I joined a bit late. Her in-depth reading and appreciation was very much visible. Very impressive. Thanks.
Thank you so much. But I'm not a youth. I'm 48 years old now. So
Murli sir is in 60s. For him, everybody is a youth, sir. He just touched 60, I think, this year. 60 was this year, 60th birthday, 2021. So anybody more than 10 years younger to him is like a youth for him. Right. Or maybe, I mean, it's a compliment to you. You don't look 48, sir. Yeah.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Purnima. It was a delight to listen to your presentation. Now,